This is A Game. Fast acting, long lasting, with no side effects.
What's going on, world? DS1 Ross, and we back here on Sheep Stay Sleep TV. Shout out to everybody who support the platform. Much love. And we are back with another video. And in this video, I want to speak on legacy. Legacy. A lot of us black men has been on cyberspace for, I'm going to say, about the last 10 years, 15 years, as far as I know, really speaking on breaking generational curses, black men building a legacy. And I totally agree with that. Totally agree with it. But my thing is, and I've always expressed this, is the generational curses that we suffer from, right? They're a part of a legacy that black men are a part of. These generational curses are part of our legacies currently. But when we suffer from these generational curses, it leaves us with a cheap legacy. And I want to start off by saying that because the only way that these generational curses can be broken, the only way that we're going to move away from creating cheap legacies, building cheap legacies, leaving cheap legacies, is we have to leave the lost value system alone. We have to leave the lost value system alone, because in the lost value system is where the generational curses lie. Let me repeat that. In the lost value system is where the generational curses lie. Okay? So you black men coming from a broken family comes from the lost value system. Black men being looked at as super predators and drug dealers and killers their whole life, it is because of the lost value system. Black men growing up in a hellish household with no peace around, with no direction, instruction, so they can become optimal men and men that have a purpose. This comes from the lost value system. Men having no purpose, men not standing on truth, living their life a whole lie, comes from the lost value system. So these generational curses that we speak about, that the Bible speaks about, that the Quran speaks about, they're speaking about the lost value system, where they say a man should study to show thyself approved. That goes into what? Education. And a man educating himself. And one of the things that's holding black men back is the lack of their education. Not only the knowledge of themselves, but the knowledge of this world that they're operating in. This is why education is an external value. You see? But in the lost value system, we're not educated properly, so we have no discipline, which leads to black men becoming wayward and worldly. You see? That's what happens to black men when they don't have knowledge of themselves, when they're not educated on who they are and how they relate to this world. You become a wayward man. You become a worldly man, a man with no discipline. A man that'll just go out and do anything. A man that can't actually sit down relax and focus on something and dedicate himself and his time to it. See, because that's what they teach you in school. That's what they teach you in school. But see, you're supposed to learn that as a child. Because if you have knowledge of oneself, this is why in the 10 life values, spiritual value is number one. If you have knowledge of yourself, and then you have knowledge of this world, which is the 7th value, which is education. If you have knowledge of yourself and knowledge of your surroundings, you will then be able to navigate in the world better, which in return will give you a better life, which will then provide a better life for your children. See, brothers, you have to understand that we have to lead by example. And you have to understand, not only do we have to lead by example, but we've been leading by example since day one. You have to understand that's what encompasses your leadership as a man. It's not just about what you say, it's about what you do. It's not about what people say you're doing, it's about what people see you doing. Because we could all get up here and say we doing stuff and say we're living a certain type of way, but do people see it? See, because when we're talking about legacy, we're not just talking about something tangible. We're talking about the intangibles. We're talking about the things, the workings of behind the scenes. You know, all of that blood, sweat, and tears that you shedded to get to your goal. See, those things are not seen. Those nights when you shedded tears because you worked so hard. Those nights, those days when you came home from work and felt like you was about to pass out. Those days. See, nobody talks about those things because we don't see those things. But your children see those things, black man. They see them. They know if you really working hard. They know what you're doing because they see it. They in the house with you. You see? So part of your legacy is not just what you leave them tangibly, but it's about who you are as a person. Do you want your children to take some of your ways, your work ethic? Not just the money you left them, not just the houses you left them, not just all of the assets and things that you left them, but did you leave them with some of your system, order, and structure? When you leave this earth, will your children still have this? Or would they rebel against everything you taught them? Would they throw everything away that you left them because they don't have this? You see? And when you leave your children all of these things, but they're void of SOS, that's a cheap legacy. That's a cheap legacy. And as black men, we have to stop leaving cheap legacies for our families. And the way that we do that is by leading by example. And leading by example is exemplifying your value internally as a man and externally. So yes, you're supposed to leave your children's children something, but you should also leave your children's children your SOS, your system, your order, your structure. Is your family following and living off of the legacy of you following this value system? Or is your legacy that you left based on you following this value system? See, because that's going to determine whether you have a real legacy or a cheap legacy. See, because leaving your kids cars and houses and jewelry and all that, that's cool. That's cool. But if they don't have the spiritual, the health, the family, the appearance, the dwelling, the education, the mobility, the professionalism, if they don't have all other 9 of these 10 life values, you leaving them money and assets and investments means what? Means what? It means nothing. It's a cheap legacy. It's a cheap legacy. Why do you think men like Donald Trump made his children work? Because he wanted his children to understand the importance of work, of earning things. Just because your dad is who he is doesn't mean you're not going to have to work and earn things in your life. You see? This is why y'all can say what y'all want to say about Trump. But his children possess the same business savvy as him. You see? So he's not going to leave a cheap legacy because his children has what? They have both. They have the internal values and the external. They don't just have the access to financial freedom. They also come from a family. And in this family, you have to work. You see? You see? And this is what we have to establish as Black men. We have to establish solid legacies. Not this fly-by-night bullshit that you see a lot of these rappers dealing with. This is why when a lot of these rappers get killed, you see a bunch of GoFundMes and they selling fish plates and all of that shit for your favorite rapper. Because he was following the lost value system. And the lost value system allows Black men to keep creating cheap legacies. We just was a bunch of niggas that drove nice cars, smoked blunts, drunk a bunch of champagne, and paid for sex. And when my father died, he left me a house and a car and some money that I don't know what the hell to do with. Because he didn't ever show me what to do with money. He just made money and gave it to me. He didn't teach me nothing about money. He didn't teach me nothing about credit. He didn't teach me nothing about nothing. He just gave me everything. And now that he's gone, I don't know what to do with it. So I'm going to just go and spend it. That's a cheap legacy. That's a cheap legacy. And this is what usually happens. This is what usually happens. We're left with nothing. Once they pay for your funeral and all of that extra stuff, that money's for you to just go and spend because they didn't teach you how to invest. Because they didn't teach you that you were important first. That's why it's called invest. You invested in yourself. But if you was never taught that having internal value along with external things makes you a whole person, but you weren't taught that. You were taught this. You were taught that all the external things in life is what make you who you are. All the external and tangible things that you leave your child is what solidifies your legacy. But without spiritual value, health value, family value, appearance, and dwelling, your money that you left for your children, they're going to give it back to the lost value system. Because you didn't teach them to be a whole person. This is why you left a cheap legacy. Because you cheated yourself. You thought it was just about the external shit. And I know there's a lot of black men turning over in their grave for how their children dealt with their legacy. But see, brothers, all of this is based on how you build it. If you build a cheap legacy, that's what you're going to leave. That's what you're going to leave. And that's what you're going to be remembered for. Just a nigga who left a bunch of money to be turned around and given back to the same system that's going to keep your people slaves. You see? Because the last thing we want to be is a rich slave. Ask young Dolph about that. Because being a rich slave is leaving a cheap legacy. Because what it is to be rich is still be a slave. That's a cheap legacy. And brothers, we have to stop leaving cheap legacies. So get down in the comment section and let me know what y'all think. I appreciate y'all for tuning into the video. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you're notified every time I drop some new content right here on Sheep Stay Sleep TV. Shout out to the A-Game Nation. Much love to the visionaries. I'm going to catch y'all on the next one. Peace.
This is A-Game. Fast acting, long lasting, with no side effects.